Good. Okay. Okay. How do I get back to that?
Just minimize. Oh, no, minimize.
You like don't close them. All right. So let's see, I was in the 50s. So Pilot, the very first company that manufactured or that does truck stops throughout the US, which you've probably seen a Pilot truck stop at some point or another. That started in 1958. We see the next couple of decades in the 60s, Love's came into being, and then in the 70s, you saw TA truck stops come into being. But in between, in the 60s, that's when the hours of service regulations really went into place, limiting a driver to only being able to operate for 15 hours. You can drive for 15 hours, but then you're mandated to take a 10-hour break. 74, that's when we had the barcode come into being, which led to us understanding where supplies were throughout our networks, and really led to being used in the first real-time warehouse management system. So that's what JCPenney installed first. They were the first one in 1975. And Walmart opened its first distribution center in 1971. So you can see all of these things starting to happen very quickly in the supply chain and with distribution centers and logistics. By the 80s, we had the Motor Carrier Act, which deregulated trucking. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what that did, because as I mentioned before, when we knew where the trucks were going, the routes they were taking, they knew where the drivers needed to take breaks. There was a lot more control and the wages were a lot higher. It was prestigious to be a truck driver back in before deregulation. By 83, that's when supply chain management became a real term. So that had to do with spreadsheets and planning tools and understanding more about your inventory, being able to get closer to that just-in-time type of inventory, which Japanese was the first with Toyota, was the first one to really implement that principle. What we saw during the pandemic became just in case, where we started seeing a lot more inventory build up in our warehouses because we wanted to make sure we had enough toilet paper. But just in time, it was like keep as little inventory on hand as possible, which worked really well until the pandemic. By 88, Walmart was the first one to do cross-docking, which is meaning you bring a big container full of widgets to a distribution center or a loading dock, and then you bring a bunch of other widgets to the same facility, you mix them up, and then you distribute it to the stores. So that was the first cross-docking operation, was done by Walmart in 88. Now it's really common. In the 90s, we saw the explosion of manufacturing in Asia, which made all of these technological advancements made that possible. But it also affords a lot of new technological advancements. Global supply chain that emerged, the enterprise resource planning systems was to be able to manage all of those different components, like the Apple phone. I forget how many countries it's made in, but it's made in like 300 different countries, the components of an Apple phone. So that is the biggest logistics company in the world, is Apple. In 97, Amazon went public. And that was the first time. None of us really used Amazon back in 97, and nobody thought it was going to be really successful. But look at us today. How many of you have ordered at least one item from Amazon this week? It's amazing how quickly it's grown. So in the 2010s, it's really the cloud computing and real-time inventory systems. And that's why Amazon is so successful, because they can keep a bunch of different SKUs or stock keeping units. I forget what SKU means, but SKU is like, you know how you can find anything online on Amazon and have it on your doorstep in 2 days? That's because these massive warehouses that we see all over the place are carrying a lot of different SKUs within that one facility to make that happen. Also making that happen was the automation. So automated storage and retrieval systems so warehouses are 40 feet tall for a reason. Within those facilities, they're automated. So it's basically these automated racking systems. You push in a code and it goes and it retrieves it and brings it back. In the 2010s is also when we had the electronic logging devices go into effect, though. Whereas we always had those hours of service truck rules that limited how far truck drivers could go. What we didn't have was a way to keep them from cheating. So what they would do to fudge it, they're like, oh, shoot, I'm only 30 miles from home, or I'm only an hour from this truck stop where can find a safe parking space. They'd keep a separate logbook. So their second logbook would show them having a different stop and stop time so that they could get to that safe place without having to stop in a random place. In 2019, they were mandated to have these electronic logging devices in their trucks. And they don't stop within the time limits that they're supposed to. And this is like either for a 30-minute mandated break after 8 hours of driving, or for that mandated 10-hour break after 15 hours on the road. They're fined significantly. They get 3 fines, they can lose their license, which means they're losing their jobs. So if you see trucks parked on the side of roads or on the side of a freeway or on a ramp or in some place that you didn't see them parking 5 years ago, this is why. And this is one of the problems that we're trying to solve today, and I'll get into that. But as I mentioned, in the 2020s, that's when we had COVID-19. And then online retailing, as we know, really exploded, which exacerbated the number of trucks moving on the roadways trying to get us our stuff. And at the same time, there wasn't a lot of truck parking being built. So overall growth from 1995 to 2025, we've seen a change in the warehouses. So like our old ITE codes. So how many of you are familiar with the ITE Trip Generation Handbook? Please tell me. You guys are transportation planners. Okay. Okay, there is a handbook that is put out by the Institute of Transportation Engineers. And what they do is they go and collect empirical data. So vehicle counts in and out of facilities to estimate how many trips are going to be generated by that facility so you can right size your roadways. So with warehousing, for example, the old traditional warehouses, you'd have a big box come in, stuff would sit on the shelves for, 60, 90, 100 days. Not a lot of movement in and out. Today, our logistics facilities are constantly moving and generating trips. So part of that went from us moving from about a 200,000 square foot facility to these high cube warehouses that can store a lot more stuff and they generate a lot more activity. So whether it's big trucks bringing stuff in, vans driving stuff out to your front door, medium trucks going to retail stores in between. It really changed how trips are generated and what we need to think about with our roadway network. So warehouse construction has significantly gone up over the last 20 years. With that, truck parking issues, most truck parking issues are associated with picking up or delivering at a truck generating facility. Warehouse employment has also gone up. Oh, I have a typo on my slide. Don't look. I don't know what OB market. I think it was supposed to say job market. Technological advancements. Billions have been invested into automation to make all of this happen and the globalization that we have today going on. Okay, I'm going to take a second. Any questions so far? This is all making sense to everyone? Okay, I'm just giving you a history lesson here. This is what's going on right now. So under construction in the US, we have, you can see, well, you guys can't see the whole chart because of this thing here. There. You can see we've had a little bit of a dip in 23, and that's really because of interest rates, not because of demand. So the demand for industrial warehousing is still on the rise. It's just because of the borrowing rates for capital have gone up with interest rates being a little higher. That's the only reason why there's been a little bit of a dip. Yeah.
Would any and all space that are basically commercial, retail, or service space have some kind of warehouse space in those establishments?
Not usually. Usually they're served by warehouses.
Okay.
There are very few examples. There's a Skechers facility in Moreno Valley is the only one that comes to mind. It's like a 1.8 million square foot warehouse that has a 30,000 square foot Skechers facility inside of it. But for the most part, and sometimes there's starting to be what's called dark storefronts now. And the dark stores are really just mini fulfillment centers. So they're taking like stuff that a bunch of people, you order it yesterday, And overnight, a big truck will bring it from one of the big distribution centers that might be like a couple of hours away, drop it in that urban hub, that dark store. And then the next day, vans will come and pick it up and drop it off at your house while you're at school or work or wherever. That's a trend. That's happening a lot. So trucking today, I'll talk a little bit more about deregulation than Jason's law, which is really what prompted the feds to start getting into the truck parking business and why we hear a lot more about it. I touched on the hours of service rules, but I'll show you exactly how it works. So for trucking deregulation, as I mentioned, pre-deregulation, the Interstate Commerce Commission dictated the routes, the rates, and who was allowed to enter, meaning the licensing, but it was not everybody was allowed to play. One of the bright sides, like I mentioned, is they had more control over planning for where the trucks were parking, where the drivers were being taken care of, and the wages were a lot higher. One of the biggest downsides is a really limited entry. There were higher shipping rates, and there was a lot of corruption within the industry. So you think of the mob, that was a thing. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of the movie Smokey and the Bandit. Yeah. It's a very fun watch, especially if you're a freight geek. Anyways, it's a fun movie. So if you ever want to go watch an old movie, that's a lot of fun to watch. Smokey and the Bandit. It's one of my favorites, where he was trying to smuggle, I think it was cigarettes or beer, something like that, from one side of the country to the other. But post deregulation, what we started happening where those barriers to entry went away, a lot more people were able to come in. They stopped dictating routes. They stopped dictating rates. It did open it up for independent owner operators, which 80% of all truck drivers today work for themselves. They don't work for a major company. And the truck driver wages, so they went down. So the only way that the big trucking companies could compete with these independent owner operators were to reduce wages, limit benefits. And then they started not having places for these drivers to stop, especially the owner operators. The trucking companies no longer felt the responsibility to take care of those drivers that were working to carry their stuff, but not working for them. So that was one of the things that started to expand, is the dire need for truck parking. And that's when the states and federal highways started really getting involved. So why is it important for long haul drivers? The majority of long haul drivers, they're only home 3 or 4 days out of the whole entire month. And think about living in a vehicle for 26 days at a time. What are all the things that you're going to need? I mean, you think of the basics like a restroom, food, a place to do your laundry. If you have an animal, a place to walk your dog. But other things like going to the dentist, a chiropractor, just basic medical needs. There's so much that the long haul drivers need. For staging, and this is what happens a lot. So with staging, that's a big issue. That's when you get to a pickup or a delivery time, which usually you have a window. You have maybe a 1 hour window that you're provided in that whole 24-hour period. Truck drivers are paid by the load. They miss that 1 hour truck, that 1 hour period, they have to wait 24 hours to get back into that facility. So they're not getting paid for a day. So it's really critical for them to get there on time. And with congestion, there's a collision on a freeway. They try to get there usually about 2 or 3 hours beforehand. The facilities won't let them on site until it's their time to pick up or drop off. So what do? They have to find a place to hang out. It's not easy to find a place for their big old truck to hang out, especially when most cities prohibit truck parking on streets. Truck stops are usually oversubscribed. There are very limited locations for them to go. They also have a 30-minute break requirement that I mentioned after 8 hours. So that's another thing. Where do they stop? Where do they hang? It's not like they can just drive into a McDonald's parking lot most of the time. There's not enough space for those big trucks to usually stop. You'll see them at Walmart a lot. Walmart has been a really good partner for the industry. But they're one of the few exceptions. And then, like I mentioned, the time off, when they are off, a lot of times they're stuck with the company truck. So even if they're working for a company, they have to find a place to park their truck for those 3 or 4 days that they're off. They can't park them in their neighborhood. Most residential areas don't allow you to park your truck there. So they have to find a truck parking place, a storage facility to pay to have their truck for a few days. Or hopefully they live someplace kind of in the outskirts where, like in unincorporated areas where the county doesn't care as much as the city does. So Jason's Law is really what opened the federal highways eyes to this problem. In 2009, Jason Rivenberg, he was killed in his truck. He was trying to find a location. He had talked to some other drivers, found out that, hey, there's this empty gas station that some of the truck drivers park at when the truck stops get oversubscribed. So you can park there. I've done it a few times. While he was sleeping in his truck, somebody broke into his truck and killed him while he was sleeping and robbed him and robbed the contents of the truck. So his wife went and petitioned to federal highways and Congress and others saying, we need to do something about this. This is a safety risk. So what Jason's Law, when it went into effect, it required the DOT to look at the adequacy of truck parking in every state. So every state has to document how much is available. Identify truck volume, so the demand for truck parking in your state, it's now part of every state has to do a statewide freight plan. If they don't get federal dollars. So there's some teeth behind it. But also developing a system of metrics. So not only what your demand is today, but what you think it will be in the future. Overall, the findings show that it continues to be a major problem. So even though since 2009, we've been trying to deal with this, it continues to be a problem and it's growing worse every day. The shortages occur at all times of the week, all times of the year, all times of the day. It's certainly worse so at night and during the weekdays. There's a lot of challenges with funding and maintenance. Yeah, you're good. But for the most part, and it's not even necessarily an understanding where the truck parking is, but it's a matter of there being enough of it. Even if you know it's there, like you're 30 minutes out, by the time you get there, that space might not be available. So there continues to be an overall just shortage in truck parking as it is. Local governments are one of the places where we're seeing there's the biggest opportunity is for local agencies to step in and do something about it. So as you can see on this, Florida is one of the states that have the highest demand and need for truck parking. And the state FDOT has done a really good job of trying to address it and continues to work towards addressing it. But the biggest reasons why we don't see more truck stops developing, a lot of cities don't allow truck stops as a use. Every state is a little different, but I'm from California, and California, every city can say, we don't want this land use in our city. It's not allowed to be built. So truck stops a lot of times by cities are deemed as not the highest and best use of the land. So we're not going to allow you to build a truck stop, even though they're allowing an industrial warehouse. It's going to generate maybe 200 truck parking demand, but they're not putting anything in place to handle that demand. And they're prohibiting truck parking at the same time on all public streets. So parking inventory, this is where you can see this is one of the results of the Jason's Law inventory that was done from 2014 to 2019. It's even worse now. I don't have the latest one, but there's been a slight increase, but just not as much as the demand has gone up for the reasons I mentioned, especially COVID. COVID-19 really skyrocketed all of the demand for industrial warehousing and trucking. The biggest challenges are really with planning, funding, expanding existing uses, and figuring out how to get the private industry to how to make it more profitable. So looking at different business models for them. But more than anything, I really think it's a local issue to solve. I already talked about hours of service, so I'm not going to go into it too much more, except for you can see that the rules have ratcheted up over the course of the last about 50 years. So we started realizing it was a problem when trucking became the preferred way of moving freight, but they're still trying to fix it. Still trying to make it more flexible for the drivers so they can get to a safe place. But it's not there right now. The most recent thing was like allowing some flexibility, like with adverse driving conditions. So if you have like heavy rain or snow or something like that, and the drivers need to get someplace safe. Okay. This is my really busy, really neat graphic. Everybody see that okay? All right, so this is how the rules work, and this is there, you can see they're kind of complicated. So there's that 11-hour driving limit before they have to take, oh, I had it wrong. It's 11-hour driving limit. So it's at 10 consecutive hours on duty, but then they allow for like 1 hour while they get timed, even if they're picking up and dropping off while they're at the loading dock, they're still, that's charged against them. There's also like the 60-70 rule, so they can't drive so many, after so many days, they have to take like a full day off. So it's really onerous on the drivers and very difficult for them to make money. Just why we have a truck parking problem too. So this is a little bit on the land use side. So I love some of the new big data. There's Geotab, there's Streetlight, there's Compass IoT, all of these. So those electronic logging devices, I think one of the coolest things that's happened with them, and I wish USDOT, they have access to this data. I don't know why they don't make it publicly available for the states. I really don't. Instead, the companies that have these devices are pulling that data out and selling it. And because there's multiple vendors, you're not getting the full picture. So statistically, you might get about 20% of the picture. And depending on what the fleet consists of that they're selling to, certain parts of the country, one of those sets might be better than another set, but this one, we use Streetlight. So what's really important with this particular one, see if I can show you this. So this is interstate, so this is out in California. This is Interstate 10, this is State Route 60. These blue areas are industrial warehousing and millions of square feet. One of the things that we realize is about 1 in every 20 trips generated by these facilities generates a truck that needs to take a break. So when you're having one of these facilities we were looking at, generates 2,200 trucks a day. So that's 220 truck parking spaces that you need at some point in this area. And none of it's being developed, none of the truck parking, and the city also prohibits truck parking on streets. So we started looking at, okay, where are these trucks coming and going from? So we pulled streetlight data and we could see, like, for instance, 29% of them and 31% are going on I-10. 14 and 18% on State Route 60, and then we could see about 23% are going out of the region, so to Arizona, they're heading out. What this was really helpful for was starting to think, okay, if we need to be within an hour, where should we start thinking through truck parking? What's the travel time that these trucks are going from their last stop to get to this stop? What's the land use access that you're requiring? So with all of these industrial facilities, you need to make sure that they're accessible to trucks. And then really paying attention to where you're going to put that truck parking and where the truck routes should be. So avoid bike and ped facilities to the extent possible. Avoid having those truck routes and those truck parking facilities near homes, daycare facilities, schools. Truck travel time and reliability is the other thing that went into that calculation when you're thinking about how far they're driving from. You got to also think about congestion. So truck traffic is growing, and this is what it's starting to look like on some of our facilities. So the further away the logistics facilities are located, this is what traffic's going to look like on your freeways coming into your urban areas, because ultimately the consumer base where all of this ultimately wants to go is here in the urbanized areas. So the further out you push those logistics facilities, the more problems you'll have with truck traffic coming into the urban area. And this is what's happening. Oh yeah.
Question. This is the demand for warehousing has made it so that we have warehouses everywhere. Why hasn't the demand for truck parking created a bunch of truck stops?
That's a very good question. And the biggest, remember how I said highest and best value of land? Okay, truck stops don't generate a lot of revenue for the local jurisdiction, but they generate a lot of impacts from the community's perspective. You have idling trucks, So emissions, you have wear and tear on your roadways, but the logistics facilities, especially if they're a point of sale facility, they're generating sales tax revenue for the city. So city of Rancho Cucamonga is a really good example of this. Their residents have realized that, yes, we want the logistics facilities because they're bringing us new parks and they're bringing us new infrastructure. We're getting all the benefits of it, but we don't want those trucks here. So we're not going to allow them to, even one of the facilities was going to allow for truck parking on site. And the residents said, we don't want that facility in our town if they're going to allow truck parking. So that's, I think there's just a disconnect in the education of the constituents not understanding the problem that they're creating by approving these types of facilities without looking at the other side of it.
Like warehousing and parking should go hand in hand.
They absolutely should. And that's what we're, so this, I'll get into some of those solutions here in a second, but, so the National Academies of Science through Transportation Research Board, there's a National Cooperative Highway Research Program project I'm working on right now that finalizes this month. Yay. So it's good to be done. But, that's what it was, is developing model ordinances and really a community outreach handbook to try to explain what's needed, what repercussions of approving these types of facilities. We're already finding out the problem when you put it next to a school, but as this picture here. But the truck parking piece of it is the other piece. So it's land use decisions ultimately. If you put your land uses in the right place, then allowing truck parking next to them should be a no-brainer. But if you're putting them in the wrong place, they want the revenue from the facility, but they don't want the trucks in and out of that. So it's just a not, yeah, they're not thinking. So some of the most common responses to community complaints is prohibit trucks on all public streets. As part of that project I was talking about, the NCHRP, we did a scan of all municipal codes across the country. And it was astounding to see how many cities prohibit trucks from parking on public streets anywhere in their jurisdiction. I think it was about 70 or 80% of the cities have it in their codes to prohibit trucks from parking on public streets. A lot of cities are prohibiting commercial truck parking facilities to be built in their communities. So it's not even a permitted land use unless you're in a place like Pennsylvania, that is a different type of police power for the local government. They require every land use to be permitted unless they work as a region and can identify where it's going to be. But that's not the case with most states. A lot of them are prohibiting truck drivers from parking at new logistics facilities like the Rancho Cucamonga case. So they're not even allowing truck parking to be shown on a site plan. And sometimes they confuse trailer parking, which is like storage for trailers, which we needed a lot of during COVID because, you know, they weren't processing stuff fast enough. But removing truck route designation, so they don't want trucks driving on certain streets. So even if it's needed to access something, and I'll show you a picture of that in a second. The residents are not understanding that they approved this project. They let this project get approved, but now they don't want to allow any access by truck to that facility. So these are the things that local agencies need to know, that trucks do arrive early for appointments. They prohibit truck parking on site. They're going to have to park somewhere, and it's probably not going to be in a safe place if it's on a freeway on or off ramp. Or in the county area that might be adjacent to the city that the residents are going to complain about, but the city can't enforce. Let's see, what else do they put on here? Oh, weight limits on streets, they can't even be enforced. If this is something else that we find out is from one jurisdiction to another. So really good example, Garupa Valley and Fontana. Fontana approved a 3.5 million square foot facility. The main route to the interstate went right through an environmental justice community that had been there for many, many years. Single family houses, but much lower income. That was their main access, and they're going to approve this facility in the middle of a residential area across the street from a school. And the city just saw dollar signs. They saw, oh my goodness, this is going to generate a lot of revenue for the city. we're gonna approve this project. So Harupa Valley said, okay, fine, we're gonna put a truck prohibition on that street, so you can't cut through our city and through our neighborhood. But when it comes down to it, the police departments can't enforce it because, in one jurisdiction, it's permitted, and in the other, it's prohibited. So they realize trucks have to be able to get through to go to those facilities, so they can't enforce it. It's led to a lot of problems in a lot of jurisdictions. And this is another example. So this is Harupa Valley. You can see where there's the Mira Loma neighborhood. So this town was mostly an equestrian town, very rural, low to moderate income. And this neighborhood was fairly well intact, and they got surrounded by all this industrial warehousing. So the Attorney General's office for the state of California decided to come after the city and say, you need to do something about this. And one of the requirements of the settlement agreement was to prohibit trucks on this segment of Etiwanda. And the picture below I took about 2 weeks ago when I was out there. You can see the truck prohibition sign off to the side, and there's a truck, and there were several trucks on the street. And not only that, there were 2 sheriffs sitting off to the side that were not enforcing this because it's not really enforceable. They're accessing facilities that were permitted by the city. So I don't know what the solution is in this particular case, but I know one of the things that we need to do as planners, especially if you end up working for a public agency or as a consultant, is paying attention to this when you're doing comprehensive planning of any sort. So this is part of the handbook that we started putting together. So one of the things is messaging to the community is that this is why you need to start thinking about truck parking. It's a human issue. It's not just a, hey, we want trucks here. There is a person driving that vehicle, and about 20% of the truck drivers these days are women. And you think about how insecure they feel when they're not only carrying millions of dollars of goods a lot of times in the back of their truck, but just personally feeling safe at a facility when they're sleeping in their truck overnight. A lot of the truck stops do have issues such as prostitution, criminal activity, theft, and vandalism, but it's not the truck drivers themselves. It just happens to be a place where they're targets. Like I mentioned, it's really easy to rob a truck driver in the back lot of a very dark facility in the middle of the night. You just wait for them to get out of their truck to go to the restroom, and they're a target. So a lot of drivers, especially the females that we interviewed during this process, is when they pull into a facility for the night, they'll stop, they'll get out, they'll use the restroom, they'll use the shower, they'll get their goods before they go and park. And then once they're parked, they have all kinds of contraptions they use to make sure that somebody can't break into their truck. So it is a real safety concern, and one of the reasons why I think USDOT and even states have been really interested in trying to solve the problem, but it hasn't gotten to the local communities yet. So hopefully we're hoping that some of this messaging, that we can bring it to local agencies and say, this is why you should care. These are people, and they're bringing you stuff that you need. So this is the big web of the guidebook that we started looking at on how to message it, because we know there are different types of truck parking problems. So some of it's staging, some of it's queuing outside of the facility. Some of it's related to emergency road closures. I live in Nebraska right now, so we have winter storms or blizzards. Like we've had 2 of them already in the last month and a half, but they closed down the whole freeway, and these trucks need to have a safe place to park. So how they think through that, vehicle breakdowns, rest, human needs, and then off-duty truck parking, like I mentioned, where they park their trucks. So these are all of the things that we started thinking through of how to message this, and then breaking each one of these components up to start coming up with solutions. So as a community is dealing with one aspect of it, we can go to them with, here's some things that might be able to help. And we also have several case studies. So we did a number of case studies across the country that showed really good ideas for dealing with some of these issues. So with staging, is really driver information. A lot of this can come from the companies themselves. So if the operator that they're going to serve has some information that they can push out to the drivers to let them know, hey, it's safe to park here, here's, or you can come on site early. Or just even understanding where that truck is so that they might be able to move their appointment up to prevent some of the staging that happens. And some of this could be required by the city as part of like development agreements or operating agreements they have with those facilities for operating in their cities. There's a lot that can be done with model ordinances. And then with emergency road closures, it's really just thinking of like emergency, like especially here in Florida. I know with the hurricanes, there's a lot of emergency planning that goes into transportation. Truck parking, I know, is one of the ones that FDOT has considered when looking at what happens during a hurricane. The other ones are rest, human needs, and off-duty parking, and how we deal with each one of those issues. Can you use public facilities? Like if you have a park and ride, is that an opportunity for you to possibly have a owner operator be able to park their truck there when it's not being used by the general public just overnight? Seattle's done some really cool things with overnight truck parking in that respect. So, and the city of Auburn up in Washington has also done some interesting stuff with identifying permit parking for truck drivers that are residents of the city, where they've designated their commercial areas for those truck drivers to be able to park their trucks overnight. So there are a lot of different solutions out there. But more than anything, what the trucks, those long haul truck drivers need is a driver's lounge, restroom facilities, signage. They need to know where to go. They need parking spaces. If we can prevent them from idling, that's great. A lot of the newer trucks have what's called auxiliary power, so they can just plug in instead of running their trucks overnight. It saves them a lot of fuel and it also reduces emissions. So being able to have those auxiliary plugins at different facilities is really helpful. And I'm just jumping into zoning standards real quick. So this is the other thing we've been working on to help cities understand what's needed and what the zoning standards should be. And this is probably like completely outside of your realm since you are more on the transportation operation side and less on how these facilities function. But it's really helpful to understand that there's different ways to estimate truck demand, not just truck trip generation, but truck parking demand. And the more empirical data that you collect, the more real your estimates become. So you're better able to understand how many actual truck parking spaces you might need at a facility. You can base it on square footage, but one of the more telling measures has been based on trip generation. Loading docks is also helpful, but not necessarily as helpful because just because you have a bunch of loading docks doesn't mean that you generate a lot of trips. So trip generation is really the best number and it's the least amount of data out there. So I would love to see somebody get behind going and doing a big study on truck trip generation. I've only seen it come out of 2 studies, one out of Texas and one out of California, where they estimated truck parking demand based on truck trip generation rates, which have only been updated in about the last, I think ITE trip generation manual finally got into looking at the different warehousing types and how they generate a lot of different traffic just over the last 5 years, 6 years. So it's a lot of times they're behind the times, just like cities are. So the design standards for these spaces, this is one of the things we're trying to help cities understand, like if you are planning these facilities, this is what you need. So part of this effort was going through and helping them visualize what this should look like and helping the planners understand this can happen. The developers are well aware of it. They've been doing it. As Prologis has actually been one of the ones spearheading some of this, and Highland Fairview is another big developer that's been accommodating truck parking on site. And this is some of the stuff that's also coming out of Pennsylvania. So Pennsylvania up in Lehigh Valley has been all over this, trying to figure out how can we help the cities understand that you can do this in a way that doesn't impact the community. You can buffer those truck parking spaces and not make them not make them as impactful on the neighboring uses. So the queuing space requirements, it's really looking at entry gates. So how a lot of these facilities have gates, that's what's caused the queuing back onto the street. So the further back you set the gates, if you set some standards, you know, you have this many loading docks, or you know, your trip generation is X. You put your gate X amount of feet off of the street so that the trucks have a place to queue on site instead of backing up all of your traffic and making your performance of your. And then the design and site plan requirements, that's the other piece of this, is really taking a close look at where you're placing your loading docks, how much room you have on site for those trucks to circulate. Just trying to do everything on site and trying to minimize the community impacts. So those queuing depths, as I mentioned, this is something we helped visualize so they understand you can do it based on number of loading docks, how many feet you need for on-site queuing to make sure you're not moving those trucks onto the street to wait. Time limits, that's the other piece of this that we're working on, communicating with cities. Is, you know, you can put signage if you know that your short-term parking is the problem, just allow trucks to stop and stage for 2 to 4 hours. You don't have to let them stay overnight necessarily if that's not your problem, but understanding the big data, and that's one of the things with those data sources that I said, because it's pinging from their trucks, it allows us to see where they're stopping. So this is GPS data, when the truck stops, timestamp, and then when it starts up again. So that'll give us a sense of how long they're parking. The better data that you have around that, the more it helps with some of these policy decisions about restricting overnight parking or not. What some of the exceptions you might want to make, what those on-street requirements would be. And it's really, like I said, the short-term parking is usually up to 4 hours. The off-street truck parking, requiring that to be designated for specific use and times. And then the other thing that's been really exciting to see happen up in Lehigh Valley is with shared parking. So figuring out how to better use loading spaces and making some exceptions for sharing truck parking between adjacent operations. So if you have multiple industrial warehouses like that popping up, allowing those facilities to share truck parking. So there's a master plan in Moreno Valley that's doing this. It's 40 million square feet of industrial warehouse that's planning, and they're building a 10-acre truck parking facility in the middle of it that'll be shared by all of those facilities. So those are the types of solutions that we need to really help affect the use. So I think I'm almost at the end here. Did you have a question? Oh, you're just stretching. Common issues and opportunities. So truck traffic impacts, a lot of times, the issues are traffic impacts, truck emissions, noise impacts, roadway wear and tear. So cities are very concerned about cost of maintenance of facilities, overall capacity limits, and then truck parking demand. But the responses, and I think these are the opportunities, these are the positive responses that we've been able to find, and some case studies around these, is really good planning when it comes to not only your land uses, but also your truck routing, and working with the facilities on off-peak delivery. So trying to make sure that, and most of the industry already does this, most truck deliveries happen between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. Not when the rest of us are on the road. They try to avoid peaks because, like I said, those drivers get paid on the load. So they don't want to be driving in at 5 miles an hour when they're not making money. Fleet electrification is, I really think it's going to go hydrogen. So because of the duty cycle of trucks really, especially less than container load, which are trucks that don't carry full loads from like across the country. They pick up smaller loads along the way. Those operate 24/7. So they might go into a depot, switch drivers, but those trucks are operating 24/7. Heavy duty trucks takes 3 to 6 hours to charge. That's a lack of an underutilization of assets. So in order for those companies to continue to operate like they do with diesel trucks, they're either going to have to go hydrogen or they're going to have to buy more trucks. And battery electric trucks are about 3 times the cost of a diesel truck. Hydrogen's about 5 times the cost of a diesel truck right now. So it's going to be a way, but I think fleet electrification will help. or zero emission, I should say. Like I mentioned, land use compatibility and design, user-based fees. So this is starting to come up a little bit more with having fee programs. So you think of a tax increment finance district, which I know you guys aren't planners. But a tax increment finance district is if you have a bunch of warehouses being built in one area, you can put a taxing, so any increase in taxes, generated property taxes in that area are reinvested into that area. So you can use that for truck parking, you can use it to maintain the facilities. There's a lot of opportunity for being able to collect those fees and help offset some of these impacts. It requires an excess impact fee study, but that's been done. And then updating the zoning code to make sure that you're requiring some of those standards that I mentioned. So when developers are proposing a project in these cities, they understand what the rules are and they can start incorporating those designs into what they understand will be their business model for that particular project. A lot of times developers aren't opposed to doing these things as long as they know what the rules are going into the process. That's been my conversations with a lot of industrial developers is they're not opposed to making things better and making the whole efficiency of the supply chain improvements work better for the drivers and everybody else. It's just they need to know what the rules of the game are. And that's all I got. So. Any questions? You know, interestingly, it was my very first job out of grad school was working for the city of Pasadena, and I was in the transportation department. And we were getting very frustrated with these trucks that kept stopping on our major corridor that had a bunch of new residential development. It was moving trucks, like your Mayflowers and your Uniteds. And they would block traffic. Like, okay, why are they doing this? And we started talking to the companies, and it's because they didn't have any place else to stop. So we amended our zoning code to start looking at off-street loading. And then when I went to work for the port and started working more on issues there and seeing trucks stopped everywhere and talking to the drivers more and understanding that, oh, wow, they don't have a place to go.
It's so crazy because it's like it seems like it would be such an obvious problem, but it's kind of like hiding in plain sight. Like there's so many trucks, and obviously we need to have solutions. But yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Are there, how many, are there a lot of hydrogen-based trucks on the roads now?
No, not very many. I think in California they have, I know in the Southern California region, there's 7 stations for fueling them. There's only, I think there's maybe 200 of them on the road out there. But they're poor. So in California, the ports of LA and Long Beach have a mandate for all trucks entering the terminals, which there's about 10,000 of them right now that are registered, have to be zero emission by 2035. That's 10 years. And with the truck being like 300,000 to 500,000 apiece, and there's 10,000 of them to be replaced.
This is in that section, that district, or?
Yeah, this is for, so the ports of LA Long Beach has the largest container terminal or container port complex in the whole United States, well, actually in all of North America. So the majority of everything that we're wearing right now, probably everything you're sitting on, came in through that gateway. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that you came down to talk to us. I have one question. Could you please tell us a little bit about your company, if you have any internships, any openings, if you have office in Florida?
We do. We have an Orlando office, and freight is just a tiny bit of what we do. So, but all we do is transportation planning. Everything from big data analytics to modeling. We have design engineers. We have bike head. everything that's transportation planning. If you just go Fehr soon, I should have probably put it on the slide. But the last part of my email address here, Fehr&Peers.com. If you just look us up, it talks about not only like what we do as a company, but how we bring people in and yeah, I was public sector for the first 14 years of my life and moved over into consulting in 2012. So Fehr&Peers I've been here almost 8 years now, and it's the most it's like being in a public agency for the simple reason that we believe really in mentoring, training, helping people grow in their career, helping them understand their path or their options within the firm. So not everybody goes in the same direction, and
Thank you.
So if anyone interested, can check the website. So Jolene has any positions, she's going to send the information to Sahela or to me, and we can post it to the website, or Digna Mejia will circulate to our network. And with that, any other question?
In your opinion, personal and professional, what would be like the number one thing that you think that needs to be done to help this kind of thing? If you had one thing you could just make happen.
I have one thing I could make happen.
Yeah. I know you spoke about like, it's just a lot of these, they just don't know. Like the city councils don't know. Is that something you would do?
I mean, one of the things is if states were to define truck parking as an essential service, that would be huge. A lot of states are really hesitant to do that because there's such pushback at the local level saying, oh, then if it's an essential service, you can't say no to it. But I think that's part of the point. They shouldn't be able to say no to it. So yeah, I think just defining it as an essential service would go a long way.
Is there any more questions?
Okay, thanks.
Thank you so much for this kind of amazing topic, because right now we are working and we want to develop the software in order to driver can understand about the truck parking in advance, in order to find the optimal truck spot. Hopefully we can at least for truck parking shortage in rural areas.
Right, that's helpful.
Thank you
Yeah,
so
thank you.
much. I have a clip for you. Let me
I didn't put makeup on today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So this is the last WTS event, am I right, for the
For this
academic
semester,
year?
this is the last event, and hopefully for the next semester, we have more, events. But I believe in during summer, we have.
Also, feel free to go to Transportation Lab, we have some refreshment for you. And also you can chat with Jolene.
And thank you, Dr. Kaiser. He's a chair of department. He always inviting professionals from various university and industry in order to undergraduate and graduate
So
student
we
interact.
are doing it for you. So if you would like to buy a car, don't look at, car options during the presentations. And look at later. All other things, okay? Thank you.
And feel free to help yourself in the transportation lab. We have a copy and please go to the transportation lab. And for Dr. Khan students, please make sure that scan the